I can't imagine Tridev without your father.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. It's very interesting, that oftentimes on film sets when the fighters or the light crew or the dancers come up to me and tell me, we love your dad's films, they're going to be like, we love Karma, we love Vishwatma, we love Mohra, we love Najayaz, Hero Hira Lal. It might be surprising.
True. Coming back to your meetings with Shriram Raghavan, and when this came to you, what were you told?
I was told that it's a film about Arun Khetarpal and that it's about the 71 war, and the character of Captain Vijender Malhotra, which I play, is an absolutely fascinating character. He would take his dog into battle with him.
Wow.
He was also there was an element of him being a bit of a prankster, where this one time he made the whole regiment operate on an inverse of the daily schedule. So he said that we're going to have breakfast at dinner time and dinner at breakfast time. And he kind of flipped the entire schedule. So everyone was kind of sleeping during the day and being awake at night. And going about their duties. Of course, a very interesting aspect of his character is the red scarf, which I won't spoil too much, but there's an interesting connection with the dog.
Agastya and your journey is quite similar. You all are, popular families, people know your parents and families, but you both are trying your best to make your own mark. Do you see this something common between you all?
Again, speaking of the circularity of life, I was exactly Agastya's age when I worked with his mom. Exactly. And I was 23 when we started. Now he's 25, but in 2024, he was 23. I was 23 when I was doing Happy New Year. Right. And let me tell you, I was not half as evolved and as mature at 23 as Agastya is. It was really special. He's also a person with a slightly philosophical streak. He's a very thoughtful actor. He's a very thoughtful actor, and sometimes you can also learn from people who are younger than you.
Right. Right, totally. Dharam Ji's last film that you're a part of.
Yes.
Someone we grew up watching. What your interactions?
I actually unfortunately didn't get to work with Dharam Ji on this. We didn't have any scenes together. But I had met Dharam Ji in the late 90s on a film set, which I don't remember the name of. But he was a hero for my father growing up. Because you see, Dharam Ji's career started in the early 60s when my father was a teenager.
Correct.
And he used to visit frequent the cinema halls. Before the interview started, we were talking about our film going habits. In the old days, whether it's Gaiety Galaxy or the single screens. So the single screens of Mussoorie, of Nainital that my father used to frequent as a teenager, Dharam Ji was his sort of screen idol. Hi, I'm Vivaan Shah and you're watching this interview on Bollywood Hungama.
Vivaan, welcome to Bollywood Hungama. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
We are recording this on Christmas Day and you're pulling this red and blue off very well.
Wearing a sort of Christmas themed attire because we are also working with the director of Merry Christmas.
Yes, that's true. And what a director he is. You talk about Merry Christmas. I've seen that film, I think, a couple of times. Even now that it's on OTT, I keep going back to it.
It really is a very moving film. It really touched me very deeply when I saw it.
Tell me about him. He is this man who speaks less, is on his own. What a talented guy. What were his interactions and initial meetings with you?
He is such an extraordinarily inclusive director in the sense that he creates an atmosphere of where he tells people that, look, your ideas are welcome. They might not be utilized, but they're certainly welcome. And I think that's a wonderful thing for a director to do, because what it does is it really stimulates the creativity of his colleagues. And so now whether or not that creativity is utilized and put in the film is another matter. But still what happens is that everybody is sort of artistically stimulated. Everyone feels as if they're contributing, they're not just doing a job. They're a part of the integral part of the process. And he is really an institution unto himself. I learned so much working with him. Firstly, I also speak as a fan, as a student of the cinema of Shriram Raghavan, because I've sort of grown up watching his films. And he's also a great cinema scholar. And what's interesting about him is, of course, we all know of his love for the French New Wave or the crime films of America, the noir films, the film noir films. But the interesting thing about Shriram sir is that he's also someone who is an ardent admirer and lover of Indian cinema. And especially so whether you want to go to Vijay Anand or the films of the 60s and 70s, Johnny Gaddar was of course an homage to Johnny Mera Naam. And in a similar way that you could say that there is some DNA of Hakikat in our film as well. with the presence of Dharam Ji and the
Right.
fact that it's a very interesting war film.
Hmm.
And you know, a lot of people actually were saying that this is a bit of a departure for Shriram sir.
Yeah, very different from what he does.
But it's actually not. Let me tell you why. It's very interesting because the filmmakers that Shriram sir really grew up on and that influenced him were the genre directors of Hollywood, who were not necessarily considered prestige filmmakers. They often made B films also.
Yeah.
People like Don Siegel, Sam Fuller, Sam Peckinpah, Robert Aldrich, Anthony Mann. These people were considered commercial directors in their time. They weren't necessarily considered directors of artistic merit. The French critics like Godard and Truffaut actually taught the Americans how to appreciate their own genre masters. Hitchcock also was not considered a very. He was considered a commercial guy. He was not taken seriously by cinema students. In fact, it was considered kind of sacrilegious to screen a Hitchcock film at a film university. But the French changed that. They made us realize that in commercial films there is also artistic value in it. And so the filmmakers, which I just mentioned, they all made film noirs, they made crime films, which Sriram sir of course loves, they made westerns, but they all were World War II combat veterans. They had all served in World War II and they also made war films. So all of them had war films. So
you know, why is it that when they make commercial films and, you know, actors also who do say a comedy role or some light-hearted are not considered artistic? Why is that?
Yeah. Exactly, like that's so true. There is a kind of, I don't know if it's a prejudice or a stigma or what it is, but it's something that sometimes you need other eyes, like for instance how the French taught the Americans to appreciate their own films and filmmakers. Sometimes I suppose one does need a sort of fresh perspective to awaken something in the minds and imagination of the audience. And sometimes you underappreciate what is perhaps closer to home.
True. You know, like I remember when Saif got a national award, I think for Hum Tum.
Yes.
And there was uproar that how can he get for this one? The minute you get for a sort of light-hearted comedy, like this same guy has done a Langda Tyagi, which was amazing. But because it's serious, we'll take that more seriously.
Interesting. It's kind of. Yeah, it's really funny, and that is why, I mean, even of course someone like Quentin Tarantino, who has throughout his body of work always paid homage to slightly more disreputable forms of cinema. Whether it's the pulp novels or the sort of B movies, the grindhouse B movies, which were considered exploitation cinema. And so it's very interesting. I think both, even Farah ma'am has an immense affection for slightly more disreputable cinema, the B movies. That her father also was a part of at one point. You know, the films of Dara. My dad also loves those films, like Trip to Moon with Dara Singh.
You know, your dad kept a great balance. Imagine to do a Tridev and then to do all the parallel cinema that he could do. But it's amazing. What does he say about how do you see that he balanced this so well? Because I can't imagine Tridev without your father.
Yes, absolutely. What's very interesting actually is something I've been thinking of a lot recently, because whenever I go onto film sets, or if anyone normally also on the street kind of approaches me, the films of my dad that they cite are very different from the films that one would think, because you can say that Baba's filmography can almost be divided into two categories. One is the art house films, the parallel cinemas of Shyam Benegal, Govind Nalani, Sai Paranjpe, and then on the other hand you have the films of Rajiv Rai and the other commercial films which he did. And it's very interesting, you know, that oftentimes on film sets when the fighters or the light crew or the dancers come up to me and tell me, we love your dad's films, the films that they mention, because they're not going to be mentioning the slightly more art house parallel cinema films, right? They're going to talk about Tridev. They're going to be like, we love Karma, we love Vishwatma, we love Mohra, we love Najayaz. These are the films that touch them. Hero Hira Lal. Although it was made by Ketan Ji, who is an art house filmmaker, that was kind of his sort of crack at a slightly more commercial kind of film. So it's fascinating that and you know, it's also interesting, don't you think, that the actors of that generation got to dabble in both forms.
That's so true,
Right now, today it's slightly more difficult perhaps for an actor to sort of be a part of both kinds of cinema.
Today we'll immediately see it and like, why is he doing like that? He's so good in that.
Exactly. If an actor is considered a slightly more serious actor, you might balk at him doing an action film. Right? It might be surprising.
True. Anyway, coming back to your meetings with Shriram Raghavan, and when this came to you, what were you told?
I was told that it's a film about Arun Khetarpal and that it's about the 71 war, and the character of Captain Vijender Malhotra, which I play, is an absolutely fascinating character. He, in fact, the brief that I got on him was, there was a lot of food for thought in it as it was, because there was certain anecdotes about him. that he was a person who was a very you could almost call him a slight eccentric of sorts,
Okay.
in an interesting way. He would take his dog into battle with him.
Wow.
He was also a bit of a, there was an element of him being a bit of a prankster, where this one time he made the whole regiment operate on in inverse of the daily schedule. So he said that we're going to have breakfast at dinner time and dinner at breakfast time. And he kind of flipped the entire schedule. So everyone was kind of sleeping during the day and being awake at night and going about their duties. And various other things. Like one thing I heard, that he used to wear a Cossack hat in battle. And often he was a kind of master of disguise in a sense. He used to outwit the enemy.
Wow.
Of course, a very interesting aspect of his character is the red scarf.
Yes.
Which I won't spoil too much, but there's an interesting connection with the dog as far as that is concerned.
Right.
And so there was all these fascinating character traits about him, which immensely gave me so much, which immediately immersed me in the character and also gave me a lot of things from which to work from. And as we got further into the research, as we got further into the tank training, I think I started developing his body language, his mannerisms. And I think the greatest compliment that I got after, we had an army premiere a couple of days ago in Delhi, which was visited by the Chief of Army Staff and by the Raksha Mantri. And many people came up to me after the screening, actual war veterans who had served under Captain Vijender Malhotra, and they told me that they appreciated my performance. I mean,
इससे बड़ी बात कुछ नहीं हो सकती. That's so true. Yeah. So all this, like you're talking about his body language, or was all this written for you? Where do you go out and study this? How do you?
I think certainly the things, my research with regard to Captain Vijender Malhotra, by the way, alias Mallu. That's his pet name, and that's a kind of interesting, iconic kind of pet name of his. Is that everyone kept referring to him as Mallu, Mallu, Mallu. And first I thought that they're calling him Mallu because he must be a Malayali. But no, he's Captain Vijender Malhotra, and he's a very dynamic person. If you see his photographs, there's a sense of the dynamism, of the charisma that he has. And I think something that I was drawing upon, because I never met him and I was only able to study his photographs, was my father's older brother, now retired General Zamiruddin Shah, served he fought in the 1971 war in the Battle of Longewala, a 185 light camelback regiment.
Yeah. Your dad once told me that in the interview.
That he fought in the 71 war, and also my father's first cousin, Mir Ahmad Shah, he was in the Armored Corps. He actually was 73 Armored Regiment. He actually was commissioned right after the 71 war, and so from both, especially from General Zoom, Zamir Chacha, they call him General Zoom in army circles, I was really able to draw a lot in terms of mannerisms and body language. And I think one thing about Captain Vijender Malhotra is that he was a man of immense moral fiber. He was an extraordinarily ethical person. And he was a man, which you could say, with a spine of steel.
Wow.
And oftentimes my own posture is somewhat here and there all over the place. I tend to slouch a little bit, So the first thing I had to do is straighten up my posture and find a stance for Captain Vijender Malhotra. And from there I proceeded.
Right. How do you connect with this character? You read about it, you take from other people and all. How do you connect with the character?
I think there is almost a sense of, you're kind of almost invoking and calling upon the spirit of that character, and you're trying to inhabit that person fully, but to do it with your own interpretation. Because I didn't meet Captain Vijender Malhotra.
Correct.
And so it was my interpretation of the facts of the research, which was able to give me some insight into who he was. And now, whether or not I've been able to convey who he was with honesty and truth, that I will let the audience be the judge of. But I certainly had, I think, one of the greatest times of my life playing him.
Amazing.
It was an honor to play him.
Right. You said so many things. Personally, what trait of his character, what moved you and what stays with you?
Certainly his relationship with his dog.
Right.
That's number one.
Of course.
I mean, there's a sort of peculiarity to that he used to take his dog into battle, but there's also a sort of something very moving and beautiful about that. And I've recently become a dog person. I was always more of a cat person. But we recently got a dog, and now I understand what dog love is all about.
Oh my God, absolutely unconditional.
Seriously, man.
That's the word for that.
It's almost like, it feels like kind of the affection one would probably feel for an offspring.
Right.
There's almost like a sort of a parental kind of instinct which gets activated with a dog. And so that was one aspect of him. The other aspect of him was, there's another fascinating anecdote, something which actually happened during combat, which I won't spoil, but it's there in the film towards the climax. But he was able to achieve a truly marvelous feat. He was able to do something where he captured certain POWs in a very, very unusual and in a very intelligent way. And you'll see the film. That was actually one of the first things that was told to me about him, is that how he managed to do that. So he was an extraordinary strategist, I think. He was an extraordinary strategist. He was an adept at sort of outwitting the enemy, in a sense, and that was another thing that I could sort of draw and build upon.
Right. Are there other things that you'll remember much later? Also, today we are in the thick of this and you've just done it and it's going to release. But 1 year later, if I talk to you, what are the few things about him that you'll remember?
The few things about him that I remember is his sort of stylish demeanor, his attire, his person, and the sort of the charismatic aspect of him. And those comes across in his photographs and also in what I have read about him and heard about him. But the fact that I think the thing about Captain Mallu that I think really, really stayed with me is that he was almost, you could say, a slightly unconventional officer.
Right, yeah.
That he was slightly not unusual, but he did things in his own way. He did things in his own way, and that's what made him a great officer as well.
True. You've done so much work, but when you play someone in uniform, and it was a real person, their family is still around. Are there responsibilities at the back of your mind?
Absolutely. I mean, there's an immense sense of responsibility which I hold towards both Ronak and Reshma.
Yes.
And I really hope to make them proud. I mean, their liking my performance would really mean the world to me. I hope they do. I hope that I've managed to convey the essence of their father. I mean, that's a tremendous thing. It's also the first time I've played a character which is based on a real life person.
Right person, correct.
Like, I think when one is doing non-fiction, as it were, there is a different responsibility that comes with it from an artistic point of view. Is that because when we are doing fiction, we tend to embellish.
Correct.
We tend to ornament the work with our own imagination. But out here, I had to utilize my imagination to interpret the facts. But I could not let my imagination and my own sense of invention intrude upon what was.
Yeah.
So that I think was the crux of the responsibility.
Right. While you've been around for some time, actors really want work, good work. How often do films like Ikkis actually come for an actor like?
Absolutely. I mean, that's the real rarity, right? I mean, I think because of the way I look, because I have a sort of boyish kind of look. I think these kinds of roles don't really come my way. Police officer, army inspector, these dynamic gangster, these kinds of roles, they don't really come my way, and I can completely understand why. So I'm very, very fortunate that I got to play this role.
Right.
And in fact, I'll share with you the story of how I landed this role. It's an absolutely hilarious one, and it shows you almost the absurdity of coincidence, which is that I think in ordinary circumstances, I perhaps might not have been considered for this role because of the way I look, as I just said. But an interesting sort of freak occurrence happened where I had met Shriram Sir many years ago at Prithvi Theatre, and we spoke a little bit about Don Siegel, who's a filmmaker that both of us love, who I just mentioned. I read an article that he read about Don Siegel, and it was one of those sheepish moments where he was standing there, and I didn't know whether to go and say hi and say, so I just, when he said, "Hi sir, I believe you like Don Siegel, I also like Don Siegel." We chatted about Don Siegel, and that was about it. I said hi, bye, and I was off. We didn't exchange numbers or speak about work or anything. Cut to, this was in 2022. Now, many years later, I think I was called for the project in 2024, August last year.
Okay.
And what happened was, in those ensuing, in the interim of those 2 years, there's an other actor by the name of Vivaan, who lives out of the country, who had been messaging Shriram Sir on WhatsApp. And Shriram Sir thought it was me.
Wow.
And so for 2
you
years,
thank him.
I should really thank him. So for 2 years, he's been conducting this correspondence with this other Vivaan, thinking it's me. Then finally the penny dropped. He realized that it's not me.
Oh my God.
So he told his people, "Jo asli Vivaan Shah, usko bulao." And so I got the call for the role. And I really sort of prepared myself for it. I put on a military jacket. I put on a sort of military bag, and I was walking around like looking like Travis Bickle from Taxi Driver with like an army jacket, walking on the streets like that, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that's how it kind of happened, And it was. And I can imagine that there must have been some trepidation on their part, because I don't really, in the conventional sense, have what is known as an OLQ, officer-like quality.
Right.
I look a bit young. Yeah. I look a little boyish. But I was able to prove myself. So it was very, very gratifying. And really, as you said, a project like this does not come along every day. Yeah. It was, along with Happy New Year and Saat Khun Maaf, it's been the happiest experience of my professional life.
That is
the most special experience. Like, the love I have for Agastya, Shriram sir, Bini sir, everybody is just, I mean, it's difficult to articulate only because they mean so much. The project means so much.
Right. You know, Agastya and your journey is quite similar. You all are, popular families. People know your parents and families. But you both are trying your best to make your own mark. Do you see this something common between you all?
You know, again, speaking of the circularity of life, I was exactly Agastya's age when I worked with his mom.
Ah,
Exactly.
nice.
And I was 23 when we started. Now he's 25. But in 2024,
Yeah.
he was 23. I was 23 when I was doing Happy New Year.
Right.
And let me tell you,
Exactly.
I was not half as evolved and as mature at 23 as Agastya is.
Okay.
Like, I was a sort of wayward kind of soul at that time. I was still, my craft had not been formed as yet. I mean, I was a decent actor, but I did not have the work ethic, the sense of discipline, the sense of devotion to one's craft and to one's work. And I really hadn't, my craft had not entirely formed. And today, of course, there's hopefully an improvement. There's an evolution. The craft has, I have worked on the craft, and I have hopefully developed a pretty rock solid craft, I hope. But you know, but at that time I was I was a kind of lost soul, a distracted kind of person. I wasn't, and it was so inspiring to see Agastya, who is completely, who in a sense learned, I think, all the lessons that I wish I had learned at 23. That he was a fully formed individual.
Yeah.
He had a complete command over his craft. He had an extraordinary work ethic, a sense of discipline, and a sense of devotion to this role, because he's given 3 to 4 years of his life. He's really poured his heart and soul into it. So it was truly inspiring to work with young Agastya. And it's it's such a coincidence that I was exactly his age when I worked with his Mamu.
Right.
And really, I mean, like, it was really special. Agastya he's also a person with a slightly philosophical streak. You know, he's a very thoughtful actor. He's a very thoughtful actor, and sometimes you can also learn from people who are younger than you.
Right.
You know,
right, totally. Another big thing that will always stay with you, which I'm sure is Dharam Ji's last film that you're a part of.
Yes.
Someone we grew up watching. What your interactions?
You know, I actually unfortunately didn't get to work with Dharam Ji on this. We didn't have any scenes together. But I had met Dharam Ji in the late 90s on a film set, which I don't remember the name of. But he was a hero for my father growing up. Because you see, Dharam Ji's career started in the early 60s, when my father was a teenager.
Correct.
And he used to visit frequent the cinema halls. Before the interview started, we were talking about our film-going habits. You know, in the old days, whether it's Gaiety Galaxy or the single screens. So the single screens of Mussoorie, of Nainital, that my father used to frequent as a teenager, Dharam Ji was his sort of screen idol. He was a symbol of heroism, of strength, of real charisma and courage, a symbol of real a glorious symbol of masculinity and of also a vulnerability.
Right.
You know, he was a man's man, but with the soul of a poet.
He did both, like romantic, He-Man and everything.
So he means a lot to me, and he also means a lot to my father.
Right.
And I can't wait for my father to see the film for Dharam Ji. Because Dharam Ji's performance is going to hit him very hard. And especially given the emotional quotient of that performance itself. But Dharam Ji, I mean, it's difficult to articulate what Dharam Ji means to us. He is our Hercules. He's an actor of Olympian proportions. I mean, one cannot even articulate what Dharam Ji means to us in terms of our cultural imagination, our cultural consciousness. He's really, I would say that he's our Hercules in many ways.
Right. You know, today, Vivaan, we are sitting at this Maddock office. They are one of the biggest producers in the industry. Do you think by working for these kind of producers, more doors open for you, actors like you, because every actor is and should be greedy for work in mainstream films. This is a mainstream out and out commercial film.
Absolutely.
Are you happy with the space you're in? You're getting the work that you want to do?
Absolutely. I'm very, very, very fortunate to have worked on this project and to work with Maddock and to be a part of a film which will be seen. You see, because I've done a lot of movies which I really poured my heart and soul into, and I thought I gave a good performance, and they weren't seen that widely. They were seen, but to a certain extent. They weren't seen as much as one would have hoped for.
Correct.
And now, of course, this is an old argument which has been happening since the old days, since, you know, where there's always been a sort of dilemma between the slightly smaller films not getting those sort of opportunities. But that is, one has to sort of figure that out as one goes along.
Right.
But certainly there is a sense of a real sense of gratitude and gratefulness that I am going to be a part of a film which will be widely seen, and the work will be hopefully appreciated.
You know, now films, I believe, have two lives. One is your theatrical run, and the day it drops on OTT, it's everyone suddenly it's trending on Twitter. People are
Correct.
talking about it and all
Correct,
that.
correct.
So do you? I mean, there are two ways to look at it. The positive way is that people will watch it wherever
Exactly.
today, somewhere or the
Exactly.
other.
People will watch it. Yeah, actually, I try to console myself with that predicament that certain films of mine, like this film I had done called Court in Bihar, it's a very powerful film, but it's a small film and it wasn't seen. Now it's finally got a home on OTT.
Yeah.
Another lovely film I had done called Il Galion Mein. In both those films, you know, I had completely transformed myself because I had to play a character which was very removed from my own personal life experience, and also regionally I had to put on a dialect in both cases. In one case Bihari, and the other case Awadhi, because the other film was set in UP.
Right.
And I had a blast doing both of those, and I really had to work very hard on sort of cracking those dialects because I didn't want them to seem phony.
Right.
Because मैं बम्बई का पला बढ़ा हूँ, although खूनो खून में यूपी गूंजता है, you know, as it's like because my father's from UP and I did boarding school up north and I've spent a great deal of time in North India, so I have observed people like that and that kind of dialect and that kind of milieu. So I was able to apply those things into the films, and I was very happy with my performances in both those films, and they were appreciated, but both of them weren't widely seen. So now with OTT, they are slowly being seen a little more.
Wow. Yeah. And also, you know, whatever work that you do, as long as it scratches some surface of your acting, digs something
absolutely,
out, nothing goes, you know, something.
No,
like,
absolutely.
yeah.
I know, and that's another thing here. That's another thing that has taught me is to not think so much about the outcome and sort of pay more attention to the process.
Yeah.
You know, I think especially in today's day and age, there is a tendency among the young, amongst a lot of us, not just the young, but to हम सफर पे इतना ध्यान नहीं देते, मंजिल पे ज्यादा ध्यान देते हैं कि the outcome or the rewards, what are the rewards or what is the sort of what you get from it, these sorts of things. But I have over the years tried to teach myself not to think so much about that. And as you said, no experience goes waste. My father keeps telling me that because there's so many films of his that he had done early on in his career which weren't as widely seen as he would have hoped. So as I said, these disappointments are kind of eternal. There's a circle of life which kind of keeps going on.
And you just see 2025 is the year where Bobby Deol and Akshay Khanna have returned like nobody's business.
Amazing,
so you just don't know what happens in this industry. Nobody really knows.
Absolutely, yeah.
Great. So Ikkis is on 1st of January. The year starts with that.
Yes.
I wish you lots of luck and I really hope it does very well for you and for Maddock, everyone.
Thank you. It was wonderful talking to you, and thank you for having me on the show.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Vivaan Shah and you're watching this interview on Bollywood Hungama.